This edition of Travels with Tony takes us to the state of Minnesota. During this time, I flew out of Chicago to Minneapolis, Minnesota. During this trip, I would experience millionaires, mansions, and one really big mall. Minneapolis is the largest city by population in the state of Minnesota. The origin and growth of the city was spurred by the proximity of Fort Snelling, the first major United States military presence in the area, and by its location on St. Anthony Falls, which provided power for sawmills and flour mills. Early development focused on sawmills, but flour mills eventually became the dominant industry. The industrial development fueled by the development of railroads and banks. Through innovations in milling techniques, Minneapolis became a world-leading center of flour production, earning the name Mill City. As the city grew, so did the area's culture. In the first few decades of the 20th century, Minneapolis began to lose its dominant position in the flour milling industry. The rise of steam power and later electric power eroded the advantage that St. Anthony Falls provided in water power. After 1930, the flour mills gradually began to shut down. To continue economic use of the river, civic leaders pushed for plans to build locks and dams, making the Mississippi River navigable above St. Anthony Falls for the first time. Once known as the flour milling capital of the world, Minneapolis has grown from a humble milling city to the cultural capital of the Midwest. Minneapolis is now a commercial, transportation, distribution, healthcare, financial, and industrial center. Now dubbed the Minneapolis because of a cultural vibe similar to New York City, Minneapolis has so much to offer from live theater to art galleries. Plus, with gorgeous lakes, parks, and a variety of museums, you're bound to find plenty to fill your itinerary when you visit Minneapolis. The American Swedish Institute is a cultural center and museum in Minneapolis. The ASI presents art and cultural exhibitions and offers innovative educational programming. It is home to the historic Turnblad Mansion, FICA Cafe, and ASI's museum store. Lovingly dubbed the Castle, the Turnblad Mansion on the American Swedish Institute campus is stylistically unique and massive in scale. Gazing up at its impressive structure, the towering turret and steep pitched roof are reminiscent of French Renaissance architecture known as chateau-esque. The hand-carved gargoyles, decorative lions, and the mansion's storied facade are carved out of Indiana limestones, embedded with million-year-old fossils, which was mined from the same quarry as the stone used in the Empire State Building. The mansion was built between 1904 and 1908, designed by Minneapolis architect Christopher Bochmy and Victor Cordella, no doubt with input from their clients, the Turnblad family. Swan and Christina Turnblad both immigrated to the United States from Sweden as children in 1868 and 1876, respectively. Swan emerged from modest means to become owner of the Svenska Amerikanska Posten, the largest Swedish-language newspaper in the U.S. Christina died in 1929 and Swan in 1933. The Turnblad Mansion is one of only 8 remaining structures built during Park Avenue's heyday, from 1885 to 1921, during a time when the streets was known as Minneapolis's Golden Mile. The mansion was a labor of love, and the work of master craftsmen can be found both in the exterior stone and the woodwork and decorative plaster throughout the interior. The mansion features 33 rooms, each room with a distinct style and decor. From Gustavian to Moorish, there are 11 tile stoves, imported from Sweden. The painted glass Visby window oversees the Grand Hall, both unique and vital connection to Swedish culture. For the Turnblad family, a century ago, and for its visitors today, the Turnblads only lived in the residence for a short time. In fact, it is believed that the house was never fully furnished. In 1929, it was donated to become what is now the American Swedish Institute, and has created its own legacy as a gathering place and cultural center for the Swedish American community and local neighborhood. The Turnblad Mansion was designated to the National Registry of Historic Places in 1971 and for heritage preservation by the City of Minneapolis in 1974. And the journey into what it takes to preserve the historic place is ongoing. The American Swedish Institute continues to demonstrate its commitment to preserving the mansion and uplifting its cultural and historical significance for future generations through ongoing restoration and preservation projects. Over the last 2 decades alone, the ASI and the community have together contributed more than $13 million to projects that include restoration of the historic kitchen, repairs to the mansion's roof, stonework, and masonry projects, as well as repairs to the solarium and others. The American Swedish Institute has received numerous awards for this diligent attention, including a 2015 Mid-Atlantic Association of Museums Buildy Award, the 2014 Minnesota Chapter of American Society of Landscape Architects Honor Award, the 2013 Finance and Commerce Magazine Top Prospects and Projects of 2012 Award, and the 2011 Partners in Preservation Award for the Turnblad Mansion's Historic Kitchen. Today, the Turnblad Mansion is joined on the American Swedish Institute's campus by the Nelson Cultural Center, a modern structure which was completed in 2012 and features an expanded gallery, programming, event, retail, and cafe spaces. Together, these buildings offer visitors to the American Swedish Institute an experience that weaves the past with the present, the contemporary with the historic. Efforts today will ensure both buildings remain for generations to come. Minnehaha Park is a city park within Minneapolis and home to Minnehaha Falls. The park was designed by landscape architect Horace W.S. Cleveland in 1883 as part of the Grand Round Scenic Byway system. It was also part of the popular steamboat Upper Mississippi River fashionable tours in the 1800s. The park preserves historic sites that illustrate transportation, pioneering, and architectural themes. Preserved structures include the Minnehaha Princess Station, a Victorian train depot built in the 1870s, the John H. Stevens House, built in 1849, and the Longfellow House, a house built to resemble the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The central feature of the park, Minnehaha Falls, was a favorite subject of pioneer photographers beginning with Alexander Hessler in 1852. Although he never visited the park, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow helped to spread the waterfall's fame when he wrote his celebrated poem, The Song of Hiawatha. The falls are located on Minnehaha Creek near the creek's confluence with the Mississippi River near Fort Snelling. The park was listed on the National Registry of Historic Places in 1969 as the Minnehaha Historic District in recognition of the state-level significance in architecture, commerce, conservation, literature, transportation, and urban planning. The John H. Stevens House is a historic structure in the state of Minnesota. Named for John H. Stevens, it was the first authorized house on the west bank of the Mississippi River in what would become Minneapolis. The house was built in 1850, marking it as the second oldest remaining wood frame house in Minneapolis. John Harrington Stevens was the first authorized colonial resident on the west bank of the Mississippi River in what would become Minneapolis. He was granted permission to occupy the site, then part of Fort Snelling Military Reservation, in exchange for providing ferry service to St. Anthony across the river. The Stevens House was moved several times, finally to Minnehaha Park in South Minnesota in 1896. The house was damaged by 3 arson attacks in 2022. The name Minnehaha Falls was in common use by 1855 when the publication of the Song of Hiawatha. With this poem, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow brought the falls worldwide fame. Longfellow's epic poem features Hiawatha, a Native American hero who falls in love with Minnehaha, a Native American woman who later dies during a severe winter. Longfellow never visited the falls himself. Today, there's a statue commemorating the poem. The Longfellow House is a 2/3 scale replica of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Built in 1907, the house was neither seen nor lived in by Longfellow, who died in 1882, but was the home of an admiring Minneapolis businessman named Robert Fish Jones. In 1885, Robert Jones sold his downtown Minneapolis fish market and built a zoo, a yellow frame house with porches at each end. Jones lived there for the next 23 years until he closed down the zoo due to complaints from nearby residents. He agreed to give the house to the city of Minneapolis, but died in 1930 before the transaction was completed. For 4 years after Jones's death, the house remained vacant, following which the park board was deeded the house, offering it to the Minneapolis Public Library. The library purchased it for $1,500, $500 of which was raised by neighborhood residents. The Works Progress Administration converted the house into the Longfellow Community Library, which opened in 1937. In 1968, the Longfellow Library closed and a brand new library opened. The house eventually fell into disrepair. In 1994, the expansion of Hiawatha Avenue was underway, and the house was moved to its current location. It was then renovated by the Codoel Architectural Group. In 2001, the house was opened as an interpretive information center run by the Park Board. The Minnehaha Falls is geologically linked to St. Anthony Falls, which is the only waterfall on the Mississippi River. Roughly 10,000 years ago, St. Anthony Falls was located several miles downstream on the Mississippi River at the confluence of the glacial River Warren. Over the centuries, water in the riverbeds broke through the limestone layer, and the churning at the bottom of the falls ate away at the soft underlying sandstone. Eventually, the hard limestone cap was unsupported and broke off. Thus, St. Anthony Falls receded, moving upstream at a rate of about 4 feet per year. As St. Anthony Falls on the Mississippi River moved past Minnehaha Creek, a second falls was created. Minnehaha Falls, which also continued to move upstream to its present site in the park. A small train station, officially named Minnehaha Depot, but also known as the Princess Depot, was built around 1875. It was a stop on the Milwaukee Road Railroad and provided easy access to the park from Fort Snelling and Minneapolis. The depot handled as many as 39 round trips per day. The interior is complete and well preserved, containing an iron heating stove, waiting room benches, and a ticket window. In 1964, the title was transferred to the Minnesota Historical Society. The Minnesota Transportation Museum assisted in the restoration of the building and today provides historic interpretation. The depot is open in the summer on Sundays from 1:30 to 4:30. Why isn't the floor flat in Nickelodeon Universe? When is the long shoots Paul Bunyan not Paul Bunyan? Where can you take a selfie with 36,000 Swarovski crystals all at once? We are able to learn all this and more in a fast-paced, fast-moving tour covering more of the Mall of America ground than you could have ever imagined. On this behind-the-scenes tour, we got a peek at how the Mall of America and Nickelodeon Universe amusement park work, plus countless details that only insiders know, anecdotes from over the decades, and exciting previews of what's to come. In 1982, the Minnesota Twins and Vikings relocated from Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington to the Herbert H. Humphrey Metrodome in downtown Minneapolis. This created an unprecedented development opportunity for 78 acres of prime real estate. 3 years later, the Bloomington Port Authority purchased the stadium site and began entertaining proposals for development. The Mall of America was chosen from 4 final proposals, and on June 14, 1989, developers and local dignitaries broke ground. On August 11, 1992, the Mall of America opened its doors. 330 stores opened for business, and more than 10,000 employees started their first day of work. Since opening its doors in 1992, the Mall of America has revolutionized the shopping experience for tens of millions of visitors every year. A leader in retail, entertainment, and attractions, the Mall of America is one of the top tourist destinations in the country and is known around the world. Today, the Mall of America hosts more than 400 events a year, ranging from concerts to celebrity appearances and fashion shows. Each year, 40 million people from around the world visit the mall, generating nearly $2 billion each year in economic impact for the state. Dave and Bethy Weinlich were married at the Mall of America as strangers in 1998 after Dave publicly announced that he was looking for a bride. He then had friends and family interview the women who threw their hat into the ring. After the ceremony, one of the first things they did was ride the mall's carousel. Then, on May 20th, 2018, Dave died after a battle with colon cancer. The mall commemorated their anniversary by dedicating a portion of the ride to their love story. A plaque on the carousel now reads, "In celebration of Dave and Bethy Weinlich, one of life's greatest love stories." There is also a placard in the Mall of America on the very spot where the 50-yard line was located at the Metropolitan Stadium, where not only every coin flip took place every game, but where history occurred on December 28, 1975. This is when Dallas Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach created the football term Hail Mary after a very long pass during a Vikings and Cowboys playoff game. In addition, there are 2 commemorative markers indicating where the Metropolitan Stadium's home plate was located, and one that marks the longest home run recorded by the Minnesota Twin Harmon Killebrew. There is even a seat mounted on the wall commemorating where the baseball would have landed. The Mall of America is committed to sustainable energy initiatives through best operational practices, cutting-edge technology, and long-term investments. The mall does not use a central heating system. Instead, 70 degrees is maintained year-round with passive solar energy from 1.2 miles of skylights and heat generated from lighting, store fixtures, and body heat. More than 30,000 live plants and 300 live trees act as a natural air purifiers within the mall. The Mall of America recycles more than 60% of its waste, an average of 32,000 tons per year. In addition, the mall recycles more than 2,400 tons of food waste to a local hog farm which feeds more than 1 million hog meals annually. The Mall of America really comes alive at Christmas. There is even a Candy Cane Institute where you can see all the innovations Santa's elves have come up with over the years. You might even get to take a peek into Santa's office. This Christmas experience costs $5, and if you want to rub shoulders with the big man, it will cost you $35 for a one-on-one in his office.
You place it into the rubber-matic like so. You close it up. Now, this next part is very scientific, okay? It's green, it's red, and then left, right, down, up, down, off, down. Is that right? That's a very important portion of it. And of course, that needs to be somewhere where it's more inconspicuous. But the final portion of this does require a little help from you guys because it's a very powerful machine and it needs something very powerful to run it. Christmas cheer. Now, do you know the best way to spread Christmas cheer?
To sing!
Sing loud for all to hear! That's right! Good on you guys. So, I know it's off-season with the Christmas song. Usually when it's small children, I suggest Jingle Bells, but you like Jingle Bells? It's a good one. Are you ready? Did you warm up today? Oh. Yes? Feeling good? Okay, here we go. You gotta sing it with me, right? Okay.
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey!
Oh, there we go. Got a little stuck there for a second, but it's okay. Okay, so now we see if it's open and it gets a little stuck. So hang on, I guess, wait a second here.
Hey.
Because somebody always spills eggnog on it.
I don't drink eggnog.
Okay, sure. But once it's done, you have a wrapped present. Yes, very beautiful with the bow on top and everything. You can even see some of the more difficult shapes we were wrapping prior to this. So right here we have the Nintendo Switch. Oh, I'm sorry, nope, that is the PlayStation 5. That's my bad. As well as, of course, the bowling ball. Very popular still with the dads. They like bowling.
The old Bloomingdale location is now a storage facility for all of the Mall of America's massive Christmas decorations. The Bakken Museum is named after its founder, Earl Bakken. Earl spent his early years building and taking apart electronic devices. When Bakken was a child, he saw the film Frankenstein. The use of electricity to create life in the movie inspired him to pursue a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Minnesota. He would go on to co-found one of the world's largest medical device companies. In 1957, following an electrical blackout on Halloween night, Earl built the first external wearable battery-powered pacemaker. Earl Bakken began collecting artifacts and literature for others to learn for his company's headquarters. Then, in 1975, the Bakken Museum became an independent nonprofit and moved to its current home in Minneapolis. In the early years, the organization's primary mission was to become an international research center focusing on electricity and life. As a result, the rare book and instrument collection attracted researchers worldwide. The museum is housed in West Winds, a 15-room Gothic-style and Tudor-style home built by William E. Goodfellow in 1930. Goodfellow owned the Goodfellow Dry Goods in Minneapolis. Architect Carl A. Gage originally constructed the building between 1928 and 1930 when Goodfellow moved in. A combination of 16th century English styles, including Tudor and Gothic Revival, the home was named West Winds and contains dark wood interior paneling, open beamed ceilings, grouped and arched windows, and stained glass. The original home had 15 rooms and 11 bathrooms. Upon his death in 1944, Goodfellow gave his entire estate, valued at over $43 million in today's dollars, to various charities, including the Girl Scouts. The home passed through several more hands before being purchased by Earl Bakken in 1976. In 1998, the first floor of the museum was built. This new construction included exhibit spaces, classrooms, a catering kitchen, and a climate-controlled artifact vault. The addition allowed the institution to focus its efforts on public-facing programs and becoming a nationally recognized STEM education center. The museum is filled with hands-on exhibits that teach about science and electricity. The activities are entertaining for a wide range of ages. There is even a Frankenstein show that combines history, art, and science. Today, the Bakken Museum inspires a passion for innovation by exploring the potential for science, technology, and the humanities to make the world a better place. The museum features interactive exhibits, a medicinal garden, a world-renowned collection of artifacts, and exceptional STEM educational programs. Saint Paul is the second largest city in the state of Minnesota, and it's also the state capital of Minnesota. In the early part of the 1800s, an area on the banks of the Mississippi River began to be established by French explorers. In 1841, the settlement was named Saint Paul by Father Lucien Gaultier, a priest from France, in honor of Paul the Apostle. During this time, The area had become important as a trading center and as a stopping point for settlers heading west. St. Paul was incorporated as a city in 1854, and in 1858, Minnesota was admitted as the 32nd state of the Union, with St. Paul becoming the capital. Natural geography played a role in the settlement and development of St. Paul as a trade and transportation center. This made St. Paul a gateway to the upper Midwest for settlers heading westbound to the Minnesota frontier of the Dakota Territory. In 1858, more than 1,000 steamboats unloaded cargo and passengers at St. Paul. For well over 100 years, St. Paul was a frontier town and a railroad town. By the late 20th century, the city became more influenced by commerce. As Minneapolis boomed as a milling city, St. Paul flourished in financing and commerce. With wealth and leisure time, cultural institutions emerged. In the 1920s and 30s, St. Paul became known as a safe haven for gangsters from other Midwestern cities. Some of the locales formerly associated with them have become tourist attractions. Economic difficulties and migration to the suburbs contributed to a decline in the central city in the mid-20th century. But beginning in the mid-1970s, the city undertook large-scale urban renewal projects, redeveloping downtown businesses and residential areas. Minneapolis and Saint Paul may be known as the Twin Cities, but they aren't identical. Old money and political power have shaped St. Paul into a dignified combination of marbled Minnesota State Capitol buildings, colonnaded mansions, tweed suits, and fine scotch. Today, St. Paul is undoubtedly the state's historical and cultural heart. Summit Avenue is home to the longest stretch of Victorian-era homes in the United States. In a mere 4.5 miles on Summit Avenue, you will find an astounding 373 of the street's original 440 homes. The historic area's mansions represent a variety of architectural styles. The street starts just west of downtown St. Paul and continues 4.5 miles west to the Mississippi River, where St. Paul meets Minneapolis. Historian Ernest R. Sandin describes Summit Avenue as the best preserved example of the Victorian monumental residential boulevard. 89 Virginia Avenue. Built in 1887 for Charles Noyes, who owned the wholesale drug firm of Noyes Brothers and Cutler, sold tons of pharmacies. Noyes was wealthy and had already had 2 other homes on Summit Avenue, but wanted one that related more to his roots in New England. 110 Virginia Avenue. Theodore L. Schurmeyer got wealthy as a partner in the dry goods firm of Lindecke, Warner, and Schurmeyer. 260 Summit Avenue. This huge brick Georgian-style mansion was built by Lewis W. Hill in 1902 as a wedding gift from his father, James J. Hill. When Lewis took over for his dad as the president of the Great Northern Railroad in 1913. The front expanding of the house was added on, almost doubling the size of the mansion. Construction of the Horace P. Rugg Mansion was completed in 1887 at an estimated cost of $24,500. 265 Summit Avenue. This large brick house was built in 1885 for John and Julia Robertson, constructed for a cost of $10,000. The home was designed by Charles Mould in the Queen Anne style. Mould designed many buildings in the city of St. Paul. 266 Summit Avenue. Built by Frederick Driscoll of the Pioneer Press newspaper in 1884, stands 11,000 square foot home with 8 bedrooms and 12 bathrooms. Driscoll had moved to Minnesota from Boston in the 1850s, and in 1860, at the age of 26, he was elected as a state legislator. The mansion was later bought by Fred Weyerhaeuser, who owned the largest lumber company in the world. Weyerhaeuser's biggest break came when he bought 9 million acres of prime timberland in the Pacific Northwest for railroad tycoon James J. Hill. Originally on the site where the incredible high Victorian castle stands at 266 Summit Avenue, there was a much smaller house built in circa 1857 by Henry F. Masterson. In 1884, Frederick Driscoll bought the property, had the home demolished, and started construction on this new $25,000 mansion. Built of pressed brick with stone decoration, the house was designed by William Wilcox in the popular Queen Anne style. It is a picturesque example of high Victorian architecture of that time, with its signature bays, dormers, and three-story tower. The original frame front porch was completely removed, and the new stone entrance added in circa 1910. The porte cochere was also an addition added in later years. Frederick Driscoll was in the newspaper business and worked with J.A. Wheelock to form the Pioneer Press. Driscoll moved from his home on Summit Avenue to Chicago in 1900, and it was bought by lumber baron Frederick Weyerhaeuser, who made it his private residence. Over the years, the house has been remodeled several times, and portions of the interior are very much altered. It has been used in several different ways over the years, housing organizations and public groups, but is now again a single-family home. 271 Summit Avenue was originally built for Joshua Sanders, who was president of the Northwestern Line Company in 1882. Just 5 years later, Emerson Peet bought it and remodeled it 275 Summit Avenue. Charles Schoenemann had his home built in 1901. It had a great blend of yellow stone with white Carinthia period Roman columns. Today the home is called Summit Manor, which is used for weddings. Charles and Alice's 25-room house was built at a cost of $18,000 and was designed by famous local architect Charles Johnson in the medieval Renaissance style. Previously on the site of 285 Summit stood an 1882 house built by early Saint Paul pioneer Henry M. Rice. In 1894, Rice sold the property to Frederick and Louisa Fogg, 286 to 294 Laurel Avenue. This huge Romanesque-style row house was built in 1887 for Will Riley as an early version of modern townhomes. The carved stone detail on the different units and the large and round Gothic tower is the first thing that greets you. Author F. Scott Fitzgerald's grandmother lived in the unit 294 for a while, which is what the building is best known for. 291 Summit Avenue. In 1905, a real estate agent and insurance salesman named George W. Garner acquired the land and had architect Thomas Holyoke build the stone mansion. In 1948, the Sisters of St. Benedict bought this home and turned it into the St. Paul Proxy. In 1965, the Volksfest Association, now called the German-American Institute, took the house over and has used it as its offices and classes ever since. 295 Summit Avenue. This Victorian mansion may be one of the most visually impressive with a contrast of red limestone, its beautiful curved tower, and accents of yellow and blue paint. It was built in 1885 for Albert H. and Louisa Lindecke, who were owners in the dry goods firm of Lindecke, Warner, and Schurmeyer. They chose architect Augustus Gauger to design their home, as he had built some warehouses for them in downtown. This sprawling Queen Anne mansion was built in 1885 for an estimated cost of $13,000. Augustus Gauger designed the home for Albert, who was one of the founders of the Northwest's largest wholesale dry goods company. The house is located at 295 Summit Avenue and consists of 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, 11 to 12-foot ceilings throughout, and an overall floor space of nearly 5,000 square feet. The outside of the home features Platteville limestone window sills and door lintels, arches, decorative accents, and applied metal crests on the chimneys. It has seen many renovations, but the most significant was in 1903. Contracted to architects Reed and Stern, with the removal of a large central bay, shortening of the corner tower, and an addition of a front porch. The mansion has been used for different purposes other than a residence, but is now a home to condominiums. 322 Summit Avenue. This large brownstone home was built as a double house in 1886. Attorney Will Leiter lived in the left side at 322 Summit, and his law firm partner, George Young, lived on the right side at 324 Summit. The home was designed by Cass Gilbert and partner James Knox Taylor as one of their first times teaming up. 329 Summit Avenue. This large brick home was built in 1895 for Dr. Charles Wheaton. 332 Summit Avenue. Known as the Hitching Post House, this beautiful home was built for Edgar C. Long in 1889. At the time, Long was the general manager of the railway supply company where he made his fortune. This is considered to be the most expensive home that famous architect Cass Gilbert designed in Saint Paul at a cost of approximately $40,000. 339 and 335 Summit Avenue. This medieval reclinaire-styled house at 339 Summit Avenue was built in 1898 for a cost of $14,000. The owner, Crawford Livingston, hired architect Cass Gilbert to design the home. The house's unique design makes it stand out on the avenue, with its second-floor facade coming out over the French porch, held up by columns under brick-molded arches. 345 Summit Avenue. Albert W. Lidenke had just taken over his dad's dry goods firm of Lidenke, Warner, and Schurmeyer when he had his home built in 1909 as a Tudor revival. The home was designed by Clarence Johnston. The present house at 421 Summit was built in 1912 for Edward and Lucinda Buxton. The home was designed in a mix of the Beaux Arts and Italian Renaissance styles by the Chicago-based architectural firm of Marshall and Fox and costs around $22,500 to construct. 432 Summit Avenue. This unique mansion was built in 1862 for $22,000, which was a fortune at the time. The second oldest Summit Avenue home was equipped with the latest technology of the day, including gas lighting plus hot and cold running water. The first owner, James C. Burbank, was into steamboats and stagecoaches as a businessman. He had Case Gilbert design the home as one of the first professional jobs. The house at 445 Summit Avenue was built in 1882 for Henry and Emma Shipman and cost around $8,500, including the carriage house. Constructed of stone on the first story and frame construction for the second and third, the house is Queen Anne in style and is noted by most architectural critics as the most well-preserved example of this style on the avenue. 465 Summit Avenue. This brick house was built in 1886 for William and Bertha for a cost of $18,400 with a $3,500 carriage house. 476 Summit Avenue. After he got rich from investing in coal and lumber with James Day Hill, Chauncey W. Griggs had this awesome mansion built for himself and his wife Martha in 1883. The giant glass skylight is the most unique feature of the home. The huge skylight was added in the 1930s when the home was used as the Saint Paul Gallery and School of Arts. The large Victorian mansion located at 476 Summit Avenue was built in 1883 for Chauncey and Martha. Constructed for an estimated cost of $35,000, the house consists of 24 rooms. Designed by architect Clarence Johnson, the home is Romanesque in style and constructed of bay-filled brownstone. The carriage house behind the mansion was built in 1882 for a cost of $12,000 and was used as a workshop to build both Griggs' house and the Foster residence next door. The house at 485 Summit was built in 1907 for James and Minnesota Minnie McLeod. The home is Tudor in style and was designed by James McLeod. 490 Summit Avenue. Built for lumberman Addison G. Foster in 1883, this huge mansion has a lot more of an open side yard than most of it in the neighborhood, and almost takes up 2 full lots. This is striking because high demand for real estate along Summit Avenue forced sellers to start selling by frontal foot instead of acres, meaning the wider your lot on Summit Avenue, the more expensive it was. This large brick house at 490 Summit Avenue was built in 1883 for Addison and Martha Foster. The home is overall Romanesque in style with Queen Anne influence, and was designed by architect Clarence Johnston. The large carriage house behind the mansion was built in 1882 and was used as a workshop to build Foster's home and Griggs' residence next door at 476 Summit Avenue. Griggs and Foster was business partners in the lumber trade and also close friends. The house at 505 Summit Avenue was built in 1896 for George Freeman, designed by Cass Gilbert in the medieval Rensselaer style. It is constructed of stone and cost $20,000 to build. 534 Summit Avenue. This unique home was built in 1884 for Walter J.S. Trail, who was a grain dealer that got his start at the Hudson Bay Company. The slanted home was later owned by Homer Clark, who was the president of West Publishing, which is now part of Thomas Reuters. 587 to 601 Summit Avenue. This is one of 3 F. Scott Fitzgerald landmarks in this part of Saint Paul. The building itself is merely a solid representative of late Victorian apartment buildings. Its sole claim to fame is that Fitzgerald was born on the 2nd floor on September 24, 1896, and lived there as an infant until his family moved to Buffalo in 1898. The Landmark Center in downtown St. Paul, known historically as the Old Federal Courts Building, was completed in 1902 and served as the Federal Courthouse, Custom House, and U.S. Post Office for the Upper Midwest. It took 10 years to build at a cost of $2.5 million. In today's dollars, it would be approximately $83 million. The building was designed by Willoughby J. Edbrook, who served as supervising architect of the U.S. Treasury from 1891 to 1892 when building construction started. He designed and organized a body of public architecture, much of which, like this structure, was completed after his death in 1896. The building has a later addition that includes the imposing North Tower and the building's largest historic courtroom. The addition was completed in 1908 from plans developed by supervising architect of the Treasury, James Knox Taylor, who served from 1897 to 1912. This building was intended to be impressive and instill upon the people of the Upper Midwest the power of the federal government. It was described as a work of art in architecture. The exterior is made of pink granite ashlar from St. Cloud, Minnesota. In addition, there is a hipped red tile roof, steeply pitched to shed St. Paul's snows. The roof is enlivened by numerous turrets, gables, and dormers with steeply peaked roofs. There are also cylindrical corner towers with conical turrets, which occupy almost every change of projection. In addition to the North Tower, there is a South Tower, which houses a chiming clock since 1978, funded by the family of former postmaster Charles Moose. The interior features a 5-story courtyard rising to a skylight and rooms with 20-foot ceilings, appointed with marble and carved mahogany finishes. Its Richardsonian Romanesque style is similar to the old post office building in Washington, D.C., as well as several federal buildings throughout the U.S. Time and official government tenants were not kind to this building. The U.S. courts moved out of the building in 1965 to a new building down on Robert Street. The post office, which remained in the building on the main floor until 1974, painted over the marble walls of the main entrance lobby with a government-issued green paint and cut down marble wainscoting to install mailboxes. Brown linoleum covered the maple floors, crude tile replaced marble mosaics, and fluorescent egg crate ceiling fixtures replaced the handsome old metal lights that had been wired for both gas and electricity. Corrugated asbestos covered the court-tile skylight. The beautiful stained glass skylight in courtroom 430 was roofed over on the outside and painted over on the inside. Throughout the 1960s, the Committee to Save the Old Federal Courts Building, made up of a group of determined citizens, worked alongside several mayors and county officials to save the building. In 1969, it was placed on the National Registry of Historic Places, one of the first structures in Minnesota on the registry. Minnesota Landmarks was established in 1970 to ensure adaptive reuse of the building and secure its future through fundraising for an extensive restoration effort. It was saved from the wrecking ball and restored to its previous grandeur, reopening to the public as the Landmark Center in 1978, after being transferred to Ramsey County ownership in 1975. Today, the Landmark Center serves as a cultural center for music, dance, theater, exhibitions, public forums, and hosts countless special events. Owned by Ramsey County, the Landmark Center continues to be managed and programmed for the community by Minnesota Landmarks, a nonprofit charitable organization. The Landmark Center also hosts Land Market, Gift Shop, the Uncle Sam Works Here building-wide exhibit, and 5 individual gallery spaces, along with a number of the area's premier arts and cultural organizations. A symbol of success, personal taste, and family life, the James J. Hill House recalls the powerful era of the Northwest's empire builder. Sitting on a bluff overlooking the Mississippi River and the city of Saint Paul, this 36,500 square foot, 42-room James J. Hill House stands as a monument to the man who built the Great Northern Railway. It remains one of the best examples of Richardsonian Romanesque mansions in the country. James J. Hill fit the nickname Empire Builder. He assembled a rail network, the Great Northern, the Northern Pacific, and the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy that stretched from Duluth to Seattle across the north, and from Chicago south to St. Louis, and then west to Denver. He was one of the most successful railroad magnates of his time. By the late 1870s, James Hill's growing fortunes and family required a larger home that reflected his elevated status within the community. Hill, his wife Mary, and their children had moved through several homes over the years, mostly in the Lowerton neighborhood of St. Paul. The Hills planned a house with the latest in modern conveniences where they could receive and entertain nationally known civic and religious leaders. Construction began in 1888. More than 300 skilled craftsmen built the house over the next 3 years. General laborers earned as little as $1.75 a day. The master woodcarver made as much as $1 an hour. The Boston firm of Peabody, Stearns, and Ferber, which was known for their impressive mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, designed a massive Richardsonian Romanesque-style mansion, then very much in fashion. The final cost totaled $931,275.01, including construction, furnishing, and landscaping for this 3-acre estate. Hill oversaw the planning, construction, and furnishing of the house as if it were a new branch of the railroad. He rejected stained glass window designs by Tiffany & Company, saying they were anything but what I want, and even replaced the architects when they ignored his orders to the stonecutters. He instructed his Boston interior design firm Irving & Kassan to finish the project. Their work included a large number of custom furniture pieces on the first and second floors. The fourth floor features a stage in a room that could seat 200 people, a grand piano, and gymnastic equipment. In addition, there was a room here where the Hill children had a playroom and even a classroom. When it was completed in 1891, the mansion was the largest and most expensive home in Minnesota. The house contained 36,500 square feet on 5 floors, 13 bathrooms, 22 fireplaces, 16 cut glass chandeliers, a two-story skylit art gallery, an 88-foot reception hall, a profusion of elaborately carved oak and mahogany woodwork, a three-story pipe organ created by renowned Boston organ maker George Hutchings, a sophisticated mechanical system throughout the mansion, which contained central heating, gas, electric lighting, plumbing, ventilation, security, and even communications. The Hill House served as the center for the public and private lives of the Hill family for the next 30 years. Children grew up in this house, and 4 daughters had their weddings in the large drawing room. Newlyweds often lived in the enormous house until their own homes were completed, 5 of which are very close on Summit Avenue. In later years, the house came alive with visits by grandchildren. The two-story art gallery was built for Hill's magnificent art collection, consisting mainly of Barbizon School of mid-19th century landscape painters. Retractable iron grills on the windows and doors provided security for the collection and the family's other valuable possessions. Much of the art collection was later given to the Minneapolis Institute of Art, which Hill helped form in 1915. The huge basement of the Hill House contained servants' quarters, a kitchen featuring a dumbwaiter to bring the food to the dining room above it, a laundry, boiler room, and hand-pumped bellows for the 1006 pipe organ in the skylit gallery above. The floor was inlaid with marble. Mary Hill kept a watchful eye over the household, including the large domestic staff, which consisted of between 10 and 12 servants. She hired maids and cooks, inspected the kitchens, and served as hostess at countless dinners and receptions. I feel it is necessary to know just where everything is and how it is, she commented in her diary. Mrs. Hill maintained the house after her husband's death in 1916, until her own death 5 years later. In 1925, family members purchased the mansion from the estate and presented it to the Catholic Archdiocese of Saint Paul. For the next half-century, the structure served as an office building, school, and residence for the church. The Minnesota Historical Society acquired the house in 1978. It was recognized as a National Historic Landmark in 1961. The Cathedral of Saint Paul is located in the historic Summit Avenue district in Saint Paul, Minnesota. The building of the current cathedral was instigated by Archbishop John Ireland in 1904. The site was formerly occupied by the deteriorating mansion of entrepreneur Norman Kitson. Charles H.F. Smith and Alpheus Stickney, 2 businessmen in Saint Paul, purchased the land and donated it to the Archdiocese. At Ireland's discretion, the Archdiocese commissioned well-known French Beaux Arts architect Emmanuel Louis Masqueret. He was also the chief architect of the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. Construction on the cathedral began in 1906. Masqueret had a budget of $1 million, and he based the cathedral on the designs of French churches of Périgueux Cathedral at Périgueux and Sacré-Cœur Basilica in Paris, as well as other French Renaissance and classical themes. Masqueret's open design allows visitors unobstructed views of the altar and pulpit. Masqueret died in 1917, having completed only a few designs for the interior, which included 3 of the cathedral's major chapels, St. Peter's, St. Joseph's, and the Blessed Virgin Mary's. The dome of the cathedral is 76 feet in diameter and 186 feet high. Warm-colored paint and gold leaf were added during a major renovation of the dome in the 1950s. The exterior walls of the cathedral are made of Rockville granite, which came from St. Cloud, Minnesota. The interior walls are American travertine, which came from Mankato, Minnesota. The interior columns are made of several different types of marble. The interior of the cathedral is illuminated by 24 stained glass windows, featuring angelic choirs. There is also a rose window in the transept designed by Charles Koenig. Electric lighting was installed in the cathedral in 1940. Heroic-sized marble statues of the four evangelists, which were sculpted by John Angel, are set into the niches of the piers in the four corners of the church. This placement, however, was not coincidental. As the piers hold up the church of stone, so the word recorded by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John sustains that churches are not made by human hands alone, but through the work of the Lord. Each statue rises to a height of 11 feet 6 inches and weighs 8 tons. One of the cathedral's signature features is the Shrine of Nations, forming a semicircle behind the altar. Each of the 6 chapels represent an ethnic group whose members contributed to the construction of the building. A statue of the patron saint is paired with a marble floor medallion representing the home country. Saint Anthony for the Italians, Saint John the Baptist for the French Canadians, Saint Patrick for the Irish, Saint Boniface for the Germans, Saint Cyril and Methodius for the Slavs, and Saint Teresa of Lisieux for the missionarians. There are also chapels dedicated to the Sacred Heart, to Mary the Mother of Jesus, and to Saint Joseph, her husband, as well as Saint Peter. For the history-minded, a mural high on an east-facing wall on the building's north side shows the arrival of St. Paul's first bishop, Joseph Cretin, in a canoe greeted by the first priest, Father Lucien Gaultier, the man who gave St. Paul its name. In the background, you see St. Paul's first church and cathedral, the log cabin, Chapel of St. Paul. From swing dancing and disco to gangsters and ghosts, the Wabasha Caves is the place in St. Paul that's had it all. If ever there was a cave that was as classy, this would be it. The sandstone tunnels and corridors that wind along Wabasha Street got their start as a silica mine in the 1850s. A few decades later, the business evolved from mining to mushrooms. It was actually the first commercial mushroom growing operation in the entire United States. However, during the Prohibition in the 1920s, the fungi operation gave way to just plain fun. When alcohol became illegal, bootleggers would use the caves as a place to store and chill their product. Owners Josephine and William Lehman first started a speakeasy during the 1920s, and then they took it up a notch when they opened Castle Royale, which opened on October 26, 1933. During that era, back when St. Paul was the epicenter for famous gangsters of the 1930s, Police Chief John O'Connor gave the bandits a safe haven in the city as long as they behaved themselves within the city limits. What they did in Minneapolis, however, was Minneapolis's problem. If you were a bank robber, a kidnapper, John Dillinger, Ma Barker, and the Barker Boys, you came here to Castle Royale. The citizens of St. Paul loved the wild and crazy post-Prohibition party life that the gangsters brought with them. But after 36 years of crime and corruption, and the kidnapping of 2 millionaires, William Ham and Edward Bremer, officials said enough was enough. The town wouldn't truly be rid of the criminals until they were able to put some of the corrupt police away, however, and that is exactly what they did. The caves at Castle Royale more than once were filled with the sounds of swing bands and dancing. They called it the finest underground nightclub. Faith Pond bought the caves in 2021, and she is continuing the swing dance tradition. On Thursday nights, the club is back in full swing, complete with big bands from around the area. The new owner of the historic cave received a crash course on its hidden history. There are still bullet holes in the fireplace, the result of a gangster shootout that happened here over 100 years ago. A Thompson submachine gun released a burst of bullets hitting a corner of the hearth, as well as its intended target. The victim mysteriously disappeared when the local constables arrived on scene. Some historians believe that the police, along with the owners, buried the man in the caves, which were cemented over shortly after the incident. Finally, ghost sightings are something employees have grown used to over the years. Tour guides recall seeing a man standing in front of a pile of bricks. The sight of the man would have been creepy enough because there wasn't supposed to be anyone in the back of the caves, but he could also see the pile of bricks right through the apparition. The Wabasha Street Caves were also a disco for a while in the 1970s. There are a number of different tours from ghosts to gangsters that you can take a part of in order to explore the caves. Alexander Ramsey was one of the most influential politicians in Minnesota history. Ramsey was born on September 8, 1815 in Pennsylvania. He joined the Whig Party as a young man, and in 1843 was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In 1848, he campaigned in Pennsylvania for Zachary Taylor, the Whig nominee for president, and played a crucial role in Taylor's win. The new president rewarded Ramsey by appointing him governor of the recently organized Minnesota Territory. In 1851, Ramsey played a key role in obtaining the signatures of Dakota leaders in order to obtain 24 million acres for settler colonists. Ramsey served as mayor of Saint Paul in 1855. He ran as a Republican for state governor in 1857, but lost by 240 votes. His second bid, however, was successful, and he served as state governor from 1860 to 1863. In 1863, Ramsey was elected to the U.S. Senate. Over the next 12 years, he reliably voted along with the wing of the Republican Party that were deemed the radical Republicans by their opponents. He pushed through a number of bills authorizing federal funds for projects in Minnesota, including railroad land grants, dams, and other infrastructure. Alexander Ramsey became Secretary of War for President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1879. Ramsey retired from politics in 1886. In addition to his political offices, he had numerous business interests. Real estate speculation provided most of the family fortune. He also served as a board member of the Saint Paul Public Library and twice served as president of the Minnesota Historical Society. He died in Saint Paul on April 22, 1903. The Alexander Ramsey House was built from 1868 to 1872, while Ramsey was serving in the U.S. Senate after his years as governor of Minnesota. 3 generations of the Ramsey family lived in this home. Architect Monroe Shear submitted designs for the Alexander Ramsey House in the then fashionable French Second Empire style. Contractor John Summers supervised construction of the 11,000 square foot mansion, which cost around $47,000. The new home was equipped with the latest technology: hot and cold running water, gas lighting, and hot water radiators. Anna Ramsey went to A.T. Stewart's department store in New York to furnish the new home, shipping home 2 boxcars full of furnishings totaling over $15,000. The Ramsey family moved into their new house, which they referred to as their mansion home, in the fall of 1872. On December 20th, they held a grand opening party, with a $1 donation to charity required for admittance. The event was promoted in the St. Paul Evening Press, who wrote, "The well-known taste and skill of Mrs. Ramsey, who provides the whole evening's entertainment, and on this occasion throws open to the public for the first time her new and elegant residence, is a guarantee of a delightful occasion." The Ramseys' granddaughters left the house and all of its contents to the Minnesota Historical Society. Today, about 95% of the artifacts in the house are original to the home. The Ramsey House first opened for tours in 1965 and was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1969. After a quick week, we found ourselves once again at the Minneapolis airport, boarding our flight to Chicago. And after a quick hour flight, we were back in our car on our way home, where we began planning our next Travels with Tony adventure.